41. Poor astrologers. Alcohol? Conan blinked, puzzled. What did alcohol have to do with any of this? Yes, Mona confirmed, then added, and the divination shows you'll run into them again very soon. Really? When will I meet those two people? Do you know exactly who they are? Conan's eyes widened as he peppered her with questions. I don't know. The water divination instrument only showed this much. In truth, it had shown even less. The rest was Mona guessing. She'd recently had an encounter that let her infer more. A few days ago, she ran out of cash, and when she went to the bank to withdraw money, the clerk who processed her transaction was Hirota Masami. That meant the 10 billion yen bank robbery case was about to happen. Mona also suspected that Hirota was Akemi Miyano, Sherry's older sister, the developer of APTX 4869, and someone connected to Shuichi Akai. Saving her might be useful later. But Mona's organization wasn't strong enough yet. She didn't want to expose herself to the black organization prematurely. If they had to interact, it would be only after her own group had grown stronger. So for now, she would wait and see. Ah! Conan's disappointment showed. Sonoko, seeing his sulk, had no sympathy, only glee. Oh ho ho, who was it that said astrology was a scam? Who's pestering you about it now? That's Sonoko. Conan's disappointment vanished and was replaced by irritation. He clenched his fists and glared at her. All right, Sonoko, Conan is still a child. Ran quickly cut in, smoothing things over and changing the subject. Since everyone has had their fortunes told and it's getting late, shall we head home? Wait, ladies, Mona interrupted. I see you're interested in astrology. Would you like to buy a copy of Introduction to Astrology? Then you could learn to do divinations yourselves. Before Sonoko could decide, Mona jumped at the chance to make a sale. She had finally found two customers who liked astrology, and her family finances were strained after feeding one extra person for the past 2 days. Sonoko, enthusiastic and already convinced by Mona's reading, immediately said, "Oh, really? I want one." Conan watched Mona's eager, almost desperate sales pitch, no hint of her earlier mysterious aura, and couldn't help but doubt just how accurate her divinations really were. Come, come, my house is nearby. I don't have the book with me, but you can come and get it. I have some astrolabes at home too. I'll sell them cheaply if you're interested. Mona packed her things and practically dragged Sonoko along, not giving her time to change her mind. Ran and Conan followed, exchanging helpless looks as the two chatted excitedly about divination. They arrived at a 2-story house. Mona walked to the door and was about to take out her key when it opened from the inside. Miss Mona, you're back! The salad is ready. When would you like to eat? A gentle female voice called. Conan hadn't expected Mona to have a maid, much less hear such a polite greeting. Salad? Surely that wouldn't be very filling for dinner. Miss Mona, won't you be hungry with just salad? Ran asked, concerned. Mona ushered them in and offered a quick explanation. Ahem, exquisite food can make people forget nutrition, and glorious sights can hide the simplest truths. I keep things simple to see the truth of the world. In other words, she didn't have money for a proper meal. No wonder she was so eager to make a sale. But if she couldn't afford better food, how did she manage to have a maid? Oh, I see, Rand said, taking the explanation at face value. Please have a seat. I'll go upstairs and get your books and astrolabes. Mona led them to the sofa and had her maid, Noelle, pour plain water for everyone before heading upstairs. Conan took the opportunity to look around. The house had a European vibe, furniture a touch old but well cared for. The place was clean and tidy. As Noelle bent to pour water, Conan noticed something on the bow at the base of her back. A glass bead that looked very familiar. It was strikingly similar to accessories he'd seen before, close to Xiangling's, and particularly like Lisa's bead. The frames matched exactly. Only the bead color and internal pattern differed. Lisa's was purple, Noelle's yellow. The pattern within Noelle's glass also vaguely resembled Xiangling's. There must be some connection. He was about to ask Noelle about it when a sharp gasp came from upstairs. Conan's question vanished as he ran toward the sound. On the second floor, he found Mona standing frozen in a doorway, one hand gripping the frame, staring into the room. Relief that she was alive washed over him, and he slipped past her into the room. It was clearly a study. Bookshelves lined one wall, stacks of books overflowed onto the floor, and a desk was scattered with strange astrolabes, the place Mona had said she'd get the books from. In the center of the study stood a boy, not much older than a high schooler, with slightly long hair and an anxious look. He was explaining himself in a rushed tone. "My books, they're out of print." But Mona ignored him. Her attention was fixed on several books on the table that had been slashed repeatedly with a knife, pages ruined. Sonoko and Ran reached the doorway just then. Ran stepped protectively in front of the dazed Mona, eyeing the stranger. Conan pieced together what he could. This young man had somehow ended up in Mona's study and had cut up her books. Mona had apparently caught him in the act. But Conan wasn't yet sure if that was the whole story. Chapter 42, The Truth of the Matter. "I'm calling the police, Mr. Tokitsu. Just because I refused to pay your commission, you actually retaliated against me like this. I want the police to come and set things right," Mona declared, pulling out her phone. Mr. Tokitsu stopped trying to explain. He looked angry. "Humph. Call them then. I won't admit to something I didn't do. I'm sure you're framing me. Do you think I can't see through such a simple trick? Just wait. When the police arrive, I'll prove my innocence in front of everyone, and then you'll—" Heh. Conan Edogawa overheard the exchange and realized Mona and the man knew each other, but the exact details would have to wait until the officers arrived. Soon the police did come. Because no murder had occurred, it wasn't the familiar Inspector Magure but his subordinate, the good-natured Takagi Wataru, who took the report. Takagi seemed a little surprised to find Ran Mori and the others already there, but he didn't comment. After greeting them, he began to question everyone. "Officer, that's the man," Mona cried, pointing at Mr. Tokitsu. "He held a grudge against me, and I caught him red-handed slashing my books." Conan, taking advantage of his small size, squeezed in close to listen as Officer Takagi questioned the suspect. He learned the man who had suddenly appeared in the study was Tokitsu Junya, a high school detective. He had come that afternoon to demand a commission fee from Mona. The maid, Noelle, had told him to wait in the study, but right after he entered and closed the door, he was knocked unconscious. When he woke up, the book on the table had been slashed, and then Mona had been seen entering the room. Forensics soon arrived. They reported that the small knife found at the scene had been examined. It was indeed the blade used to slash the books, and only Tokitsu Junya's fingerprints were found on it. Still, Tokitsu insisted he had not done it and accused Mona of setting him up to avoid paying his fee. Noelle confirmed he had come to demand payment, but she denied ever telling him to wait in the study. "The study is where Miss Mona keeps important books," Noelle explained. "It's very important to her, and strangers are generally not allowed in. I would never have told Mr. Tokitsu to go into Miss Mona's study." Noelle also commented on the reason Mona had refused to pay Tokitsu. "It's not that Miss Mona can't pay him. Even though she eats mushroom and vegetable salads every day, she always pays my salary on time. She wouldn't withhold money without reason. She refused to pay because Mr. Tokitsu's investigation results were wrong." Then Noelle described what she had actually seen that afternoon. "Mr. Tokitsu came to ask for his fee. I told him to sit for a moment and went to pour him a glass of water. When I came back with the water, he was gone. I saw the front door open and assumed he had left, so I didn't think anything of it." Conan's thoughts raced. Eating mushroom and vegetable salads every day didn't necessarily mean someone was destitute. If Mona were that poor, why would she keep a maid? And if a high school detective's employer could claim his results were flawed, perhaps his skills weren't as sharp as he claimed. Conan was especially curious about the nature of Tokitsu's commission and what had gone wrong. He tugged on Mona's skirt to get her attention and hear more before the police questioned her. Mona looked down and saw Conan. She squatted to talk with him. He was about to ask whether there had been some misunderstanding. He didn't want to believe a detective would irresponsibly botch an investigation, when his eyes widened for a fraction of a second. He forced himself to calm down at once when Mona gave him an inquiring look. Conan had noticed something he hadn't expected. Like Lisa and Noelle, Mona had a glass orb at the base of her neck. The frames of the orbs were almost identical, but Mona's was blue, and the pattern inside looked faintly like flowing water. Could the pattern represent water? If Lisa and Noelle also had orbs, There had to be some connection between them. Just then, Conan remembered something else he had seen at the study entrance. The floor, a little outside the doorway, was damp, as if water had recently flowed there. The house was otherwise immaculate. Noelle was conscientious. She wouldn't leave water on the floor without tidying it up. Could the dampness be linked to the incident? To Mona? To Noelle? Conan also put together more of the scene. The study was, in effect, a locked room. No windows nearby, only a small sealed window at the top used by Mona to observe the night sky. The door had been closed after Tokitsu entered, and surveillance footage from a camera that pointed at the upper half of the doorway confirmed the state of the door. Mona had specifically bought that expensive camera for this room, one of the reasons she'd been struggling financially and eating only vegetarian salads lately. If the whole thing had been a simple frame, an ordinary person wouldn't have guessed the method, especially Conan, who believed magic did not exist. Yet Mona's talent, flow of reality, and illusion could do things that looked like magic. Conan considered the possibility that the incident had been staged. Tokitsu entered and closed the door. Mona used her talent to slip through the crack of the closed door, knocked him out, slashed the books. Mona had apparently spent a long time locating just the few books she didn't need for this act, planted Tokitsu's fingerprints on the knife, and then left using her talent. With the surveillance camera covering only the upper half of the doorway and showing the door closed, it would look like Tokitsu had been framed. Mona didn't expect Conan to deduce anything so quickly. She had set the scene knowing that even someone clever wouldn't suspect something that relied on a talent like hers. But Conan's brief glance at the glass orb on the back of her neck, the damp floor near the study door, and the connections between orbs had given him food for thought. Clues that might point to a much more complicated truth than a simple payment dispute. 43. Strange watermarks. Conan had a dozen theories spinning in his head, but he calmly asked Mona to explain the commission in detail. Only then did he learn that flowers in the front garden had often been picked for some time, but the culprit was never found, so they had hired a detective to investigate. Noelle recognized the name Tokitsu Junya. He had been known as a high school detective in Shikoku and had helped the police on many cases. She'd heard Tokitsu had recently moved to Tokyo after the Lavender Villa case in Shikoku, which is why she hired him. Tokitsu's initial report blamed a neighbor's child. He even presented footprints on the lawn as evidence. Mona had accepted that result at the time, but she was short on cash and had only asked him to come back later for the fee. Later, Noelle discovered the flowers were being taken by stray cats and found muddied paw prints around the bushes. When Mona told Tokitsu, he adamantly refused to admit any mistake and accused Noelle of lying. Angered, Mona decided not to pay him at all. Conan frowned. Footprints alone didn't prove a child had done it. If a client brought new evidence, the proper response would be to reinvestigate, not to cling to a conclusion and insult the client. He also teased, "Sister Mona, aren't you an astrologer? Can't you divine who picked the flowers? Or are your astrological powers useless for petty crimes?" A white flash crossed his glasses. "Of course I can," Mona protested. "But astrology predicts people's fates. You don't use it for trivial things like this." Conan's persistence grated on her, but the questioning from the others had ended, and it was Mona's turn to present her evidence. She pulled up the surveillance footage aimed at the study. Conan slipped close to watch it inconspicuously. The footage showed the books on the study desk intact through the open doorway before Tokitsu entered. After the door closed, it never opened again. No one entered or exited. The only other opening was a small sealed window high on the wall, effectively a locked room. When the door was finally opened, the books were in ruins. Tokitsu exploded. "Impossible! This footage is doctored. Someone must be framing me." He replayed the video repeatedly, but couldn't find any tampering. Conan watched too. On the surface, every piece of evidence made it look like Tokitsu had deliberately destroyed the books inside the locked room and was caught when Mona stopped him at the door. Still, Conan couldn't shake the feeling that the case wasn't that simple. If Tokitsu hadn't done it, why would Mona and Noelle set him up? They didn't seem to have any prior grudge. Framing someone for a commission dispute seemed unlikely. Officer Takagi Wataru, however, took the footage at face value and looked satisfied. Secretly, he muttered to himself that it felt oddly easy. Usually a detective would appear to help, but today there was none. Something about it felt off. He brushed it aside. The evidence seemed conclusive. Ahem, Mr. Tokitsu, you'll have to come with us, Takagi said, and Ms. Mona's losses will probably need to be compensated by you. He casually asked Mona how much the books were worth. About 35 million, Mona said, walking over to glance at the titles and making a rough estimate. 35 million! The room erupted. Tokitsu stammered, "Why don't you just rob me?" He had planned to accept responsibility for a few cheap books, maybe pay and hope to avoid jail. But 35 million would wipe out years of commissions. He could not sit still at that. "Why are you so surprised?" Mona snapped. "These are out-of-print books. They're very valuable." Her estimate seemed deliberately chosen to drain his savings. After all, her complaints against this so-called detective weren't just about money. Who knew how many botched cases his arrogance had caused? Asking for compensation was the least she could do. Noelle added, "The cheapest book in Ms. Mona's study is at least 500,000, which made Conan internally stare. If a single volume cost that much, the full collection would be astronomical. No wonder Mona wasn't actually struggling financially. If her earlier claims were true, perhaps she was being modest about her means. The police, hearing the value, suddenly tread more carefully, anxious that any accidental damage might cost them months or years of pay. Conan still didn't believe Tokitsu was the culprit. He replayed the footage over and over, but couldn't find any sign of editing. The door stayed closed after Tokitsu entered, and there was no way in or out. Unless someone could enter the study while the door was closed, there was no explanation for how Tokitsu could have been knocked out inside, and someone else left without a trace. The only oddity he could find was a faint wet trail at the study door. "These watermarks are strange, like something wet slid across the door," he said, unsatisfied and moving toward the study to point them out. "Ah," Sonoko smacked him on the head. "Kid, why are you running around again? It's just water spilled on the floor. What's the big deal?" By then, Tokitsu's resistance had been subdued. The officers put handcuffs on him and prepared to take him to the station for further questioning. 44. Library incident resolved. "No, I can't let him be taken away like this. This isn't the truth." Conan clenched his fists, but it was only his own thought. Everyone else more or less accepted that Tokitsu Jr. was the culprit. Before he could dash over to stop them, someone grabbed the boy by the collar and hauled him up. Sonoko glared at Conan. "Ha! I knew you wouldn't behave, brat. It's over. Sit still while I pick up the books and we leave." Of course, despite the unexpected twist, Mona hadn't forgotten she needed to sell books for cash. That money might be her food budget for the foreseeable future. On the way back, Conan replayed the whole incident in his head, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Ugh, he still couldn't make sense of it. How had anybody gotten into the study without opening the door? Had Tokitsu Jr. really done it? Even Conan began to doubt his own judgment. The next day, unable to shake the fact that Mona and Noelle had beads like Lisa's, Conan decided to stop by Xiangling's restaurant first to see if she knew Mona and Noelle. To his surprise, Noelle herself was working there, wearing a maid outfit with a butterfly at the small of her back, the same glass beads decorating it, smiling as she carried dishes and greeted customers. Conan sat at an empty table, and when Noelle came to take his order, he asked, "Noelle, why are you working here? Weren't you Mona's maid yesterday?" "Because of what happened, she has to spend a fortune replacing the books. Tokitsu's compensation wasn't enough. She couldn't pay my wages. I told her I didn't need a salary, but Miss Mona wouldn't hear of it. She couldn't bear me living on mushrooms and vegetable salad with her, so she found me a job where I'm really needed." Noelle smiled. Conan was speechless. All that money, gone in less than a day? Back to plain salads, maybe even worse than before. So Xiangling and Mona were connected after all. He'd come to the right place, and that lifted his spirits a little. Then a thought struck him. Xiaxi also knew Xiangling and Lisa, yet she didn't have a bead. Was it a coincidence that she knew them? "Noelle, do you know Sister Xiaxi?" he asked casually. "Of course I do. Xiaxi. She's amazing and helped me a lot. I'm really grateful." Noelle's reaction was intense. She clearly felt deeply thankful. What had Xiaxi done to deserve such gratitude? If Xiaxi knew Noelle, was that another coincidence, or was Xiaxi linked to them too? And if so, why no bead? Conan chatted a bit longer. Noelle never lost patience with the child's questions and answered every one, but he learned nothing new. The restaurant got busier, so he finally let her go. 1 week later, at Tsukikage Island Pier, Xiaxi and Lisa stood looking out over the sea. "Lisa, you really found the curator's transaction records?" Xiaxi asked. "Of course. I sneaked into the curator's office and dug up the records of his deals with the village head. He had just restocked and hadn't destroyed them yet." Lisa arched an eyebrow and laughed. "By now, the cops should have found his goods. I tipped them off anonymously before I left. I wonder what face the curator's making. Pity I was still a step behind that brat. Tsukikage's case already happened." At the same time, in the children's section of Beika Library, Conan's investigation into Xiangling and the others had hit a wall. They seemed like ordinary people who just shared trinkets. But he'd made real progress on the drug in his body. The previous day, a dark-skinned boy from Kanzai, who called himself Hattori, had shown up and forced a mouthful of baiju on him. The antidote had kicked in, and he'd briefly returned to his adult form. If he drank the whole bottle, he should turn back into a high schooler for good. Looking at Genta, Mitsuhiko, and Ayumi around him, Conan felt a pang. This might be the last time they played together. He planned to go home and finish the liquor to return to his real self. Suddenly, sirens wailed outside. Conan opened the window and saw several patrol cars at the library entrance. Heads popped up beside him. Ayumi said, "Police cars? Maybe a case?" They tried to go downstairs, but Inspector Magure strode straight into the children's section and ran into them. The curator, who had been there moments earlier, stepped forward. "Officers, please. There are children here. Say whatever you need outside." Magure ignored him, ordered Officer Takagi to block the curator, and strode past without even greeting Conan and the others. Strange. Why was the curator so nervous? Conan watched Magure walk to the window, open a box hidden beneath the foreign imports. The same reversed books Conan himself had found, pull out one, and immediately order the curator's arrest. The moment the inspector reached into the box, the curator tried to slip away, but Officer Takagi stopped him. Surrounded, he could only watch in despair as the police uncovered the drugs he'd been hiding. Conan had suspected the foreign books concealed either guns or narcotics. The discovery confirmed it. But how had Inspector Magure known exactly where to look? As the inspector turned to leave, Conan hurried up to ask. Only then did Magure notice him. He muttered that an anonymous caller had tipped them off and rushed away. There would be paperwork for hours. He also remarked that Matsuda would soon be transferred into the Violent Crimes Division. With cases piling up lately, an extra detective would be a godsend. Megure didn't care why someone had asked for the move. Chapter 45, Strange Gaze. Conan watched Inspector Magure walk away and suddenly remembered Lisa had once said she worked at a library. An idea struck him. He ran up to a staff member and asked, "Excuse me, is there a librarian here named Lisa?" "Yes, but she's been on leave for the past 2 days. If you're looking for her, you'll probably have to wait until tomorrow." So Lisa did work here. Could she have been the one who made the anonymous report? Conan thought about it. He also hadn't seen Xiaxi doing any commissions for the last 2 days, though they used to bump into each other on the street all the time. If both had disappeared at the same time, had they gone somewhere together? On Tsukikage Island, Xiaxi checked the world mission completion status on her system and smiled. Finally, the library murder case that had dragged on was marked complete. The library director hadn't moved for a while, so she'd needed time to gather evidence. Now that the drugs were in the library and Lisa had filed the anonymous police report, the moment she discovered the director had brought them back, the director wouldn't have had a chance this time to silence anyone by killing them. What mattered now was the situation on Tsukikage Island itself. Xiaxi hadn't expected that. After the Moonlight murder case, both the village chief and the island's biggest capitalist would be killed together. With the village chief gone, the position had actually been given to Sangonomiya Kokomi. Xiaxi had just drawn Kokomi's identity. now the newly appointed village chief, and felt uneasy. Kokomi used to be the divine priestess of Watatsumi Shrine in Inazuma, skilled in strategy and diplomacy, but she was still a newcomer to this island. Tsukikage had been almost entirely controlled by a group of drug traffickers, and Shiashi suspected far more people than just the old village chief had been involved. Since things had settled down elsewhere, Shiashi and Lisa had come to check on Kokomi, help where they could, and bring the evidence Shiashi had already collected. The next morning, while Shiashi was out looking for a cat, she ran into the detective boys again. This time, Conan was walking unsteadily, clearly in rough shape. Worried he might be sick, Shiashi stopped them and asked about him. When she did, she realized Conan wasn't ill, he was hungover. Shiashi was speechless. Were elementary school kids drinking now? Then she remembered how the high-proof liquor could temporarily restore Conan to his high school body. He must have chugged a whole bottle to force the change. Of course, the protagonist somehow avoided alcohol poisoning after drinking that much. Seeing him fine, Shiashi didn't stop the kids from going to school, but she didn't do nothing. She took out her phone and called Ran Muri to warn her about Conan's drinking and tell her to keep an eye on him. Don't let him pick up a drinking habit like Mr. Muri. Through the phone, she heard Ran promise tenderly to take better care of Conan, and Shiashi put the phone down satisfied. Then she felt it, someone watching her. She snapped her head around, but all she saw were passers-by. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. Still, her instincts were rarely wrong. Someone had just been looking at her. Lately, she'd often had that vague sensation of being observed, though usually there had been no hostility behind the gaze. An acquaintance? That seemed impossible. She'd only just arrived in this world, and the only people who could know her were characters she'd pulled. They had no reason to hide. She decided not to worry for now. If whoever it was targeting her, they would show themselves sooner or later. Behind a pillar not far away, a man leaned back and checked the photo on his phone. It had captured Shiashi clearly as she crouched to talk to Conan. The children around her looked slightly blurred, as if they were merely supporting cast to her. He muttered to himself, "Should I call you Shiashi or Lumen?" On his way to school, Conan shuddered as a cold chill ran down his spine, but his groggy brain dismissed it as the wind. He didn't think much of it, though when he got home and found Ran waiting, he would soon understand what that chill had meant. At the Black Organization's base, Jin intercepted Cointreau. "You returned to Japan a while ago. Why are you only coming to base now?" he asked, frowning. Cointreau shrugged. "Nothing special. It's been a long time since I was in Japan. I wandered around and got a bit out of touch with the surroundings." Jin didn't press. Cointreau had been with the organization long before Jin had joined. He answered only to that person and was effectively above Jin in standing. He rarely appeared before other members these days. Only a few veterans even knew the extent of his role. Jin trusted him. He couldn't be a rat. The question had been routine. "There's an operation coming up," Gin said after a moment. "Tequila needs to trade for a list of software engineers. You've been free lately, so I'll make you the contact for his operation." "Tequila?" Cointreau frowned, thinking. "Is he one of Rum's subordinates?" "Yes," Jin confirmed. "All right, send me the details and I'll take a look," Cointreau said. He didn't refuse. It wasn't a difficult task, and his help could be useful given the recent operations in Japan. 46 Unlucky Agave Cointreau. "Oh, right. I heard a newcomer got a code name in under a month recently. He's from research, I think. Send me his profile. I want to take a look." "There's no problem sending it. It's not highly classified or anything. But why the sudden interest in a newcomer? Did you find something?" Jin asked, suspicion sharpening into excitement at the end of his sentence. "Why are you so keen on him being a problem? To disappoint you, I didn't find anything. I'm just curious about the energy compensation medicine he invented that earned him the code name." Cointreau rolled her eyes. Sometimes she really couldn't understand Jin's obsession with catching spies. "Shh." Jin immediately lost interest. "I'll send you the profile later." With that, he left. "Shh, it really is Al-Haytham." Later, alone in her safe house, Cointreau stared at the profile on her phone with a tight little sigh. She had felt a foreboding when members of the organization mentioned the newcomer's appearance. Seeing the name and photo confirmed it. This was Al-Haytham, from Sumeru. If he sees me, Lumen will know too, she muttered, rubbing her temples. Now is definitely not the time to meet him. I'll have to avoid him for a while. The thought left her with a headache. Meanwhile, in the bustling convention hall, Xiaxi's eyes sparkled. Wow, so this is the gaming conference venue. Ran, thanks for inviting me. This is my first time at an event like this. She swept a hand toward the rows of machines and demo booths, excitement bright on her face. Though Xiaxi suspected the conference wouldn't go off without a hitch, this was the same event where a black organization member, Tequila, would make a fateful appearance. She reminded herself the incident should still be some time off. Tequila's death had been an unlucky accident, and there should be enough time before the case occurred. She planned to enjoy as many games as possible. Once the incident happened, the venue might be shut down and she'd lose this chance. Ranmori grinned. Not at all. And hey, I should be thanking you. You holding that early party for my dad last night was great. About the party, Ran. I'm sorry I didn't keep an eye on Mr. Mori and let him drink so much. He seems awful today, Xiaxi said awkwardly. Xiaxi, what are you talking about? How can you blame yourself? It's Dad who can't control himself. Ran laughed and slapped Kogoro's back so hard the older man nearly toppled over. Conan watched Uncle Mori being scolded by Ran with a private smirk. A few days ago, when Ran lectured Conan about his hangover, he'd been lectured with equal enthusiasm. Now it was Kogoro's turn, how the tables turned. Xiaxi didn't go searching for Tequila. Instead, she threw herself into the games alongside Ran. She had no intention of intervening before the case. She only needed to wait and then solve it afterward. Come on, Shinichi! Ran suddenly shouted and slammed a punch at a boxing game machine in front of them. The screen flashed a high score, 400. Xiaxi recalled that 400 was the top score so far. Hidaki Nakajima, a developer from the Mandarin Heaven Company and a college boxing club alumnus, had only managed 348. Ran's punching reputation was well earned. Seeing all this, Xiaxi glanced at Conan and found him sweating, looking uncomfortable. Curious about her own potential score, Xiaxi accepted the boxing gloves when Ran offered them. She slipped them on and considered how hard to hit. Half strength should do. After all, she was still inhabiting the traveler's body. Scoring too high would attract attention, and she didn't want to break the machine. She swung. The machine dinged. The screen confirmed it. 400. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Another girl had matched the high score. A tall man in black passing by turned his head at the noise, his gaze lingering on Xiaxi for a moment before he moved on. Ran scratched his head. Gosh, what's wrong with girls these days? Are they all so violent? Ran-nichan, I need to pee, Conan said, unable to stand it any longer, using the restroom as an excuse to slip away. Nakajima happened to be heading to the restroom too and offered to take him along. On the way, they brushed past a tall man in black. Conan's instincts snapped into gear. He'd recognized the scent, the posture. The man was a member of the organization that had shrunk him into a child. Conan also heard the code name the man used on the phone, Tequila. As Tequila kicked the booth carelessly, Conan seized the moment. He stuck an eavesdropping device and a small transmitter to the sole of the man's shoe, then followed him to the restroom to listen in on any conversation about the organization. Back elsewhere, Cointreau put down her phone, exasperated. Is this really the caliber of someone in the intelligence division? Tequila had casually revealed his own code name over the phone, then managed to mention gin and vodka in front of others as well. Thank goodness Tequila didn't know her code name, or he'd have blurted that too. Though Tequila was young, you couldn't underestimate him. Cointreau also vaguely remembered mentioning that this world's protagonist was a grade schooler. Could it be the very child Tequila had run into? No, there was no way Tequila could be that unlucky. Could he? Unable to shake her unease, she called him. Hello, who is this? Tequila answered, not bothering with formality. Rum had only arranged a one-time meet for him before the operation and hadn't given him a contact code name, so he assumed whoever he met today was an uncode-named newcomer and spoke brusquely. Did you encounter anything unusual just now? Cointreau cut straight to the point, ignoring his tone. Given his intelligence, there was no point in arguing. Anything strange? Tequila hesitated, then replied, There was a girl at the venue who looked a lot like you. Does seeing a girl who looks a lot like you at the presentation venue count as something strange? Tequila asked casually as he tried to open the box with the key in his hand. Strange, the key won't go in, there's no lock. He didn't wait for an answer before opening the box. Cointreau, hearing the intermittent voice over the line, was about to warn him that there might be an eavesdropping device nearby, but when Tequila's words registered, he fell silent and his expression hardened. Then, after Tequila muttered about the key not fitting, a metallic click and bang! The phone line went dead. Cointreau hung up. Apparently, he didn't need to act himself. Tequila had been unlucky. At the Nintendo game presentation venue, Conan Edogawa stared at the smoking crater, furious and devastated. Damn it, he muttered, pounding the ground. He had finally gotten a lead, and then this happened. The police were soon on scene. Shiashi saw Inspector Megure arrive, but he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was an officer with slightly curly hair and sunglasses who looked strikingly like Matsuda Jinpei, the same man she'd seen on the Shinkansen. The officer glanced up, noticed her staring, and for a moment looked toward her. He began to head in her direction, but Megure called, "Matsuda, where are you going? We need to check the scene." The man paused, shot Shiashi another quick look, and turned to follow Megure. Shiashi was stunned. It really was Matsuda Jinpei. But how could that be? Matsuda was supposed to have died before this plot even started. The butterfly effect wasn't supposed to reach back into past events, and from the way he'd looked at her, he seemed to recognize her. Her head throbbed with questions she couldn't answer. She pushed them aside. For now, the present case needed solving. If Matsuda's being alive had anything to do with her, and he truly recognized her, he'd come looking. She only needed to wait. Megure's team had almost finished collecting evidence. Combining what she remembered with Conan's earlier hints, Shiashi quickly worked out who the killer was and how the crime had been carried out. She walked straight up to Inspector Megure and laid out the truth. It turned out the bomber hadn't been a random attacker, but someone targeting a specific person. The culprit was Takeshita Hironobu, an employee in Nintendo's game development division. He'd been trying to avenge an ex-girlfriend who'd been driven to suicide by Nakajima Hideaki. Takeshita had placed a bomb inside his own briefcase, checked it in next to Nakajima's, and secretly swapped the claim tags, but he hadn't anticipated that Nakajima was trading tags with someone else. The other man had retrieved the briefcase, opened it in a restroom to check its contents, and was killed in the explosion. Conan realized immediately that Tequila had been an unintended victim. The Men in Black's lead hadn't been cut off. Nakajima, who'd made the tag trade with Tequila, still knew something. Even though Shiashi had solved the bombing at the presentation, Conan still used his tranquilizer watch on Kogoro Muri to draw out the truth. Just as Megure prepared to take Takeshita and Nakajima back for questioning, he stopped them. "Wait," he said. "I have one more question for Mr. Nakajima. Who was the tall man in black you traded with?" Nakajima couldn't offer much more. All he would say was that the meeting had taken place at a bar called Cocktail on the top floor of the Daikoku building in Baikatown. Conan could not suppress his urgency. He bolted from the presentation venue and tore toward the Daikoku building. Shiashi watched him go with helplessness. Now that those people knew Tequila was dead, they'd surely realize the trading location had been exposed. Time had passed. They could have cleaned up the scene already. Still, Conan was desperate for leads. She couldn't stop him. Conan ran breathless into the Daikoku building and stepped into the elevator as it began to climb. He felt he was finally closing in. Then, before the elevator reached the top floor, a violent explosion ripped through the air above them. Conan's heart dropped. When the doors opened, he tried to sprint for the stairs, but the adults at the scene held him back. Later, police reports would describe the scale of the blast. The amount of explosives was astonishing. The cocktail bar had been obliterated. There was no way to confirm who had been inside. All that remained was the knowledge that the men involved had been trading a list of the world's most prominent computer engineers with Nakajima. Shiashi read the news about the cocktail explosion in the paper. She'd expected it, so she didn't dwell on the details. What did strike her as odd, however, was how little the media had said about her own role. Although several outlets called the case solved by a rookie female detective, none published her name or photo. It was unusual and unnerving that information about her had been withheld so completely after such a sensational event. Had the media suddenly grown a conscience about protecting privacy? She forced herself to stop worrying. Without clues, speculation did no good. The boat would right itself when it reached the bridge. The truth would come out in time. 48. Bank robbery involving 10 billion yen. Xiaxi suddenly noticed a newspaper report about a 10 billion yen robbery at Beika Bank the previous day. Akemi Miyano had already made her move. Xiaxi had to think carefully about how to intervene. In truth, she wanted to intercept the 10 billion yen. She didn't intend to return the money to the bank or let the black organization get it. She wasn't short on funds now, but money never hurt, and a newly forming organization had many needs. 10 billion yen would be very useful. For a moment she felt she had forgotten something, but if it could be forgotten, it probably wasn't important. Far away in Yokohama, Matsuda Jinpei sneezed and wondered if he had caught a cold. He felt like going to a shrine to pray. Nothing had been going smoothly lately. He hadn't had time to meet anyone and was stuck here for a technical exchange. Finally done! Cointreau stretched in front of his computer and looked at the photo of Xiaxi the media had intended to release. He sighed. As expected, a troublesome little sister. Being so high profile, it took a lot of effort to find a way to quietly hide your information. He opened a Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department transfer order on his screen. Matsuda Jinpei had been assigned to Yokohama for a 3-month exchange. Cointreau stared at the face on the monitor, the same face he'd seen 3 years ago, and wondered whether rescuing that person impulsively had only increased his workload. Wouldn't it have been easier to stay in the explosive ordnance disposal team? Why did he have to be transferred now? This was no time for Lumine to know certain things. He also thought, are these detectives that incompetent? The culprit from 3 years ago still hadn't been caught. No, Cointreau corrected himself. Judging by Hagiwara Kenji's death, it had been 7 years. 7 years, and still not even a clue. As a member of an underground organization, he didn't know whether to be satisfied or annoyed. His phone on the desk rang. Jin. Hello, Cointreau answered. Why are you calling? Have all the traces at the cocktail bar been cleaned up? That place no longer exists. Do you know what caused Tequila's accident? Jin wasted no words, told Cointreau about the cleanup, then asked straight away about the cause. Cointreau concluded Tequila's accident was bad luck and incompetence. Jin was silent for a moment, apparently unsure how to comment on Tequila's death, then changed the subject. You know Akemi Miyano's status with the organization, right? Cointreau's voice was flat. Yes, it seems you plan to move against her. I remember you knew her parents. Are you reluctant? Don't test me. Just because I knew her parents doesn't mean we were close. Besides, I've never wanted immortality. Whether it's Akemi Miyano or Sherry, they mean nothing to me. He checked the time on his computer. Anything else? If not, I'm hanging up. I've been dealing with the aftermath of Tequila long enough. I need to rest. The line went dead before he could finish. Cointreau blinked, a little put out. He hadn't expected Jin to hang up on him. He put down his phone and prepared to sleep. By now, some time had passed since the Nintendo game presentation. Conan had recovered from the frustration of losing the black organization's trail by one step. He hadn't given up hope of finding them and learning the method to turn back into a high school student, but that was not a concern for the moment. Yesterday, when Conan had gone to the bank with Kogoro Mori to deposit money, he had witnessed an armored car robbery. That was the 10 billion yen case reported in the paper. He'd found Miss Hirota Masami suspicious, but Uncle Mori later told him that all the armored car robbers had been shot dead and a lipstick belonging to Miss Hirota had been left at the scene. Conan immediately suspected another group had been present, the people who had killed the robbers and framed Hirota Masami. He got Hirota Masami's address from Inspector Magure and searched her home, finding the key to a rented safe deposit box. But when he was careless for a moment, Hirota Masami hit him in the back of the head. Dazed, he endured the pain and managed to stick a tracker on her car before she left. Once he recovered, he took his solar-powered skateboard and followed the tracker. Dusk, a seaside warehouse. Hirota Masami, no, Akemi Miyano, drove to the location Jin had texted her. She pulled a gun from her wallet and entered the warehouse. Inside, besides gin and vodka, another person waited in the shadows. Their figure was obscured. Akemi had no strength left to pay attention to faces. She was focused on the conditions Jin had promised, but it quickly became clear Jin had lied. He never intended to let Sherry go. Jin fired a single shot into Akemi's chest and told Vodka to take the safe deposit box key from her. Cointreau, who had been standing quietly to the side, felt the air's humidity rise slightly. He glanced toward a corner of the warehouse and sighed. Luckily, being by the sea, the humidity was already high, so a small increase made little difference. Jin heard the sigh and mocked him. What, remembering your relationship with her parents? Feeling reluctant? No, Cointreau answered and added, since we have the key, let's go. He left without waiting for Jin's reaction. It was better not to let Jin and the others linger and risk discovering things they shouldn't. The warehouse fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the faint, uneven breath of a woman lying on the concrete. Conan arrived on his skateboard a moment later and froze at the sight of the blood-soaked figure, Miss Hirota. He sprinted to her without thinking. Hang in there, Miss Hirota, he shouted, trying to keep her conscious. Cheat, Conan. The voice was weak, but when the woman forced her eyes open, Conan's heart lurched. The face that looked up at him was Akemi Miyano's. Who are you, really? Edogawa. No, my name is Shinichi Kudo. I'm a detective. Conan's voice trembled as he spoke his real name. He had seen her wounds and knew he was too late. What he learned next stunned him. The killer belonged to a vast, shadowed organization, the same group that had reduced him to a child. With her last strength, Akemi pressed a safe deposit box key into Conan's hand, told him its location, and begged him to retrieve it before the organization noticed. Please, little detective. Conan watched her eyes close for the last time and bowed his head. He hadn't been able to save her. Hands shaking, he pulled out his phone and dialed Inspector Magure. He set the phone down and turned back to her, and something struck the back of his head. The last thought before blackness swallowed him was a single puzzled question. Why hadn't he heard footsteps? Outside, Xiaxi watched the boy slump to the floor where a stone had hit him. A tiny ripple of guilt flickered through her, but she didn't hesitate to erase any trace of her attack. She moved to Akemi's side and stared at the unmoving woman. Kokomi, is she still alive? She asked. Rest easy, traveler. I've kept Miss Miyano on the barest thread of life with sea-bead oath. She's in a state of suspended death. Sangonomiya Kokomi stepped forward, a translucent jellyfish drifting beside her. As Kokomi approached, Akemi's breathing steadied and the bleeding slowed. Once her wounds were half mended, Kokomi released the spell. It was better that Akemi remain unconscious. Neither Kokomi nor the traveler wanted their rescue witnessed. They had spared her primarily for her value. Akemi's ties to Shio Miyano could be leverage. After surgery on Tsukikage Island and further treatment, they planned to ship her abroad to Dawn Winery. If they ever needed leverage against Shuichi Akai, Akemi could prove invaluable. When Shiho later became Aihaibara, they would tell her sister had deserted the organization, hoping that, to protect Shiho, Akemi would cooperate. They weren't as merciless as the Black Organization, Kokomi reminded herself. They would not force a killing. Xiaxi lifted Akemi and followed Kokomi to a hidden speedboat at the shore. As they sped toward Tsukikage Island, Paymon's voice pinged in Xiaxi's head. Traveler, Noel reports the billion yen from the safe deposit box is secure and unseen. Traveler, you're amazing. Money and person both secured. Xiaxi nodded. Noel had been quick. She'd only just sent the location, but the traveler bristled at the wording. Paimon tilted her head in the mental space. Isn't that what happened? No, Xiaxi thought back, frowning. Dark lines of annoyance crossed her brow. I'm stealing from thieves at worst. Sirens keened faintly in the distance behind them. Police are coming. Hold tight, traveler. We're accelerating, Kokomi said, opening the throttle. Xiaxi braced a hand on the rail and cupped Akemi with the other, careful not to let their precious cargo go overboard. Inside the warehouse, the sirens finally reached Conan. He stirred and sat up, fingers rubbing the back of his head but finding no wound. Whatever had hit him left no lasting pain. It was as if the strike had been a dream. Before she left, Shiashi had asked Kokomi to heal him. Kokomi knew her own strength and had worried she might have cracked his skull. Conan looked where Miss Hirota had been sprawled. Only a dark bloodstain remained. The body had vanished without a trace, as if it had simply walked away. Inspector Meguri's team arrived soon after. Conan told them everything he could, carefully omitting anything that would reveal the black organization. The police concluded Hirota Masami had killed herself out of guilt. Yet the missing corpse, the wrong key Conan produced, and the billion-yen disappearance pointed to a second party. Someone had struck Conan, swapped the key while Akemi still held it, taken the money, and removed the body. There were no leads. The billion-yen theft was quietly shelved. At Black Organization headquarters, Gin listened to the report with a cigarette between his fingers. Another party? FBI? He asked, flicking ash. Unlikely. The FBI wouldn't take the money, said Cointreau, taking a sip of his drink and moving away from the smoke. Gin smirked at the reaction. Still hate the smell? Smoking's unhealthy, Cointreau said flatly. You should quit before lung cancer catches up. Lung cancer? Gin scoffed. After that drug, you think I can still get sick? Vodka, who had been listening silently, blurted the question that had been on everyone's mind. Akemi Miyano's body disappeared. Think she might still be alive? You pulled the trigger. A shot to that spot is fatal under normal circumstances, Cointreau replied, dismissive. Gin drained his glass and rose. True. He turned to go, then paused as Vodka hurried after him. Cointreau watched them leave without another word. Yes, under normal circumstances. That day, Shiashi was excitedly preparing to go home. She had finally met the person she'd wanted to see, and in her excitement, she'd impulsively spent all the money in her wallet. Now she didn't even have enough for a taxi. With no choice, she started walking. Fortunately, she was fit. Even after a long walk, she didn't feel tired. Huh? Ayumi, Mitsuhiko, Genta, and these two kids, what are you doing here so late? Shashi stopped in front of the police station when she saw a small group of children. On closer inspection, they were the detective boys, plus two unfamiliar faces, a little boy and a brown-haired girl with a cold expression. Shashi guessed the girl must be Shiho Miyano. Only now, that childlike form, Ai Haibara. Paimon floated beside her and couldn't help but comment. Traveler, I didn't expect Sherry's childhood form to be pretty cute. Almost as cute as Paimon. That cold look, though, doesn't suit a child at all. Shiashi chuckled and agreed. Sister Shiashi. Ayumi and the others heard the shout, turned, and called out when they saw Shiashi, Natsume Natsuki. Shiashi walked over and learned the names of the newcomers. The boy was Toshiya, and the girl was indeed Ai Haibara. So, why are you out so late? It's dangerous for kids to be wandering around at night, Shiashi scolded, hands on her hips. Sister Shiashi, it's like this, Ayumi hurriedly explained. Toshiya's older brother is missing. We investigated and think someone from the newspaper office next to the police station kidnapped him and is forcing him to print counterfeit money. Shiashi listened, resting a hand on her chin. The detective boys didn't joke. When they all mobilized, it meant something serious. And even if they were impulsive and reckless, they were good kids who wouldn't lie. So you reported it to the police and they didn't believe you? Uh-huh. They were so mean. They said we watched too many gangster movies, Ayumi said, looking to Shiashi for support. Sister Shiashi, do you believe us? Ai Haibara watched the newcomer with a curious, cold gaze. She felt an odd familiarity she couldn't place. Shiho had only met Cointreau when she was a baby and remembered almost nothing. Still, when Ayumi asked, adults rarely believed children making such claims. Yes, of course I believe you, Shiashi said without hesitation. Yay! Ayumi, Mitsuhiko, and Genta cheered and clustered around her. Shiashi noticed one child missing. Where's Conan Edogawa? Don't you detective boys usually act as a group? Conan told us to stay here, Genta grumbled, but he ran off by himself. The more he tells us not to move, Mitsuhiko added. The more we want to move, Genta finished. So you want to go check the newspaper office? Shiashi asked. Can we? Genta asked hopefully. Of course, I'll go with you. Shiashi readily agreed. This was a chance to help, and maybe even earn a little primogem. Besides, she wasn't afraid of a fight. If things got dangerous, she could always summon a geoshield. Yay, the kids shouted. One rule, Shiashi warned as they set off. When we go in, you stay behind me. Don't run around. Yes, they chorused. Shiashi led the way, the children trailing close behind so she could be the first to intervene if anything happened. Ai Haibara watched the confident woman ahead and wondered at her willingness to believe a wild story and take a group of kids into a potentially dangerous place. Still, the group reached the newspaper office entrance quickly. From the doorway, Shiashi sensed the office was empty. She pushed the door open and went inside, the children following closely. Huh, there's no one here, Genta said, disappointed. Mitsuhiko checked a desk. I don't see any counterfeit bills either. Shiashi moved to a stack of newspapers and flicked through them. Under the pile were sheets that looked like 10,000 yen bills, dozens of them. Wow, so much money, Ayumi said. Genta immediately started counting on his fingers. How many eel rice bowls can this buy? 1, 2, 3. Mitsuhiko leaned closer and squinted. That's strange. The portraits on these bills are missing the left eye. They haven't been colored in yet. Shiashi glanced at the surveillance camera in the corner. As she did, the office door opened and a woman's voice called from the doorway, eerie and amused. It's like a wish-fulfilling Daruma. You only paint in the eye when your wish comes true. Ayumi and the others looked up and saw a woman in black pointing a gun at them. Before anyone could react, Shiashi slammed the door hard from behind. The impact knocked the woman in black unconscious and her handgun clattered to the floor. There were 2 other kidnappers in the office. Shiashi didn't give them time to draw weapons. She grabbed an empty pigment bottle from the desk and hurled it. It struck both men in the forehead, and with a bang, they crumpled to the floor. By the time the children recovered, everything was over. One man remained, hogtied and sitting against the wall, Toshiya's older brother. Toshiya ran to him, babbling, and began working at the ropes to free him. "Big brother," he cried. Conan Edogawa stood nearby, surprised. "Sister Shiashi?" he said, taken aback by her sudden appearance. "Nice job, Conan Edogawa." Shiashi patted Conan's head approvingly as he dragged another kidnapper over and finished him with a quick kick. Inside, she thought the boy's round head felt oddly satisfying to pat. Ai Haibara watched the scene with that same cool detachment, a small, unreadable expression on her face as the rescued brother untied himself and the children buzzed with relief. The little rescue had ended almost before anyone realized it had begun, and for now, the danger was over. 51. Organizational Base. The next day, Tayton Elementary School, Class 1B. After last night's chaos, first the counterfeiting case, then dashing off because someone had called saying Professor Agasa was in danger while he was walking Ai Haibara home, followed by Haibara blurting out her black organization identity and crying herself into a wreck, and finally retrieving the mismailed drug research data from Professor Hirota, only to walk straight into yet another case. Conan hadn't slept a wink. He had dozed through every lesson. Luckily, it was first grade, and he could coast through the kiddie curriculum without consequences. He stifled another yawn. He couldn't stop thinking about last night. Haibara, clutching his sleeve and sobbing, had been so raw and human that it convinced him she really was a defector from the organization. From her, he'd already learned one solid clue. The organization used liquor code names, and the 2 who'd forced those pills on him in the amusement park, who'd turned him into this, were vodka and gin. Keep staring, and I'll decide you're a pervert. Haibara opened one eye and met his fixed gaze with flat annoyance. Huh? Sorry. Conan hadn't realized he'd been staring and quickly looked away. So? She said. If you've got something to ask, spit it out. Don't expect I'll answer everything. He hesitated. He had no real leads, nothing specific to go on. But one thing had nagged at him, something normal channels never turned up. Now a defector sat next to him. Maybe she'd seen what ordinary people couldn't. He sketched a few small, bead-like shapes on a scrap of paper and slid it across. Haibara, back in the organization, did you ever see beads like these? Glassy, spherish, or anyone wearing jewelry like this? She glanced, then shook her head. No, you hardly even looked, he protested. How can you be sure? No need. She sounded surprisingly certain. Something that distinctive would stick in my memory. If I haven't seen it, it means I haven't. Conan sagged inwardly. Even you don't know. What are they supposed to be connected to then? She asked, with a flicker of curiosity. Some organization thing? Probably not, he said. But several people carrying similar beads have crossed paths with Well, Xiaxi, she's the woman who took you to the newspaper office yesterday. Detective instinct says there's a secret hiding there. Isn't unraveling a mystery the best part? He grinned, but Haibara just stared at him with that same blank expression. Under her gaze, his grin wilted. Fine, not interested, but could you stop looking at me like I owe you money? By the way, she said, voice low, who exactly is this sister Xiaxi? Her moves yesterday were like the organization's action squad, smooth, precise. Heh, that was only the start. Night vision like a cat, reflexes, lockpicking. Conan began to list attributes so absurd they sounded like exaggeration. Achoo! Somewhere nearby, a single emphatic sneeze cut through the classroom hum. Xiaxi rubbed at her nose. Someone bad-mouthing me, she muttered. Paimon buzzed at her side, annoyed, amused, and entirely unafraid of being overheard. Must be the wind, traveler. The sea breeze is strong. Didn't expect it to be this chilly. Should have dressed warmer, Xiaxi said aloud, half to herself. Do travelers even catch colds? Hey, don't act like you're another species. Travelers are people. People get sniffles, Paimon scolded. No science in curses. Xiaxi glanced out toward the water. I came to taste the sea breeze, she said, sounding oddly lighter than before. Zhongli, you're here. Zhongli stood with his hands folded behind him, looking out to where the horizon blurred into a line of distant land. I thought you would be. This island will soon be ours, he said, as if discussing the weather. It was the best choice for a base, remote, off regular routes, agreeable climate. Ningguang picked it. Xiaxi frowned. But the map I saw, the plot seemed smaller when we first bought it. I walked the perimeter, and it didn't match. Zhongli's expression did not change. With Ningguang coordinating, even with assistance from Deluc and the Traveler, time and capital were limited. She selected the Isle for the organization's base for those very reasons. The shortcomings of the area can be resolved. Only you, Zhongli, a voice said. Practical, pleased. Expanding real estate after purchase. That's a bargain a merchant can't resist. The tone fit Ningguang's kind of pragmatism. Xiaxi, standing beside them, mirrored the sentiment with a grin. A merchant never lets herself lose, she added, shrugging as if that settled everything. Naturally, Zhongli agreed. Once the purchase is finalized, adjustments are within our rights. No contract has been violated. Xiaxi gave him a big thumbs up, pleased at how smooth the operation had gone. The island would be perfect, an isolated, pleasant spot, easy to cloak and to control. It would make an ideal headquarters, if only they could keep the wrong kind of attention away. 52. Effective astrology. Xiaxi wandered the island, taking in the landscape while quietly running through the tasks ahead. The island itself was hers, but not the facilities. No labs, no housing, nothing yet standing. Once Kava finished his current project, she could bring him over to design and erect whatever they needed. Laborers were a liability. Outsiders brought too many unknowns. Better to recruit a geo-user. Having Zhongli cover construction and supervision would be ideal. She worried, too, about people farther afield. How was Al-Haytham faring? He still answered messages, but without meeting him in person, she couldn't stop worrying. Newspapers had reported that White Dove Pharmaceuticals, one of the institutes he'd been collaborating with, had been bombed after Sherry's escape. Xiaxi hoped the fallout hadn't reached him. There were two other prizes on her list: Sindora Company's AI, Noah's Ark, and its DNA tracking software. Since arriving in Conan's world, she had coveted Sindora's virtual reality tech and the work on Cocoon. This was full-dive VR, a playable, immersive holographic environment, a dream turned real. Hiroshi Sawada, the project's creator, was nothing short of a genius. Learning that Sindora had locked him away 2 years ago and driven him to suicide felt like the wanton destruction of an irreplaceable mind. Even so, his AI lived on. In the original timeline, Noah's Ark self-destructed when the game ended. Xiaxi suspected it only did so out of fear that humanity would hunt it or misuse it if it revealed itself. With Nahida, the god of wisdom, at her side, the AI would have no reason to hide. If she could get Noah's Ark and the Void Terminal connected to the organization's network, their intelligence and communications capabilities would skyrocket. Sindora, though, was doing well and would never sell the AI or its DNA tools lightly. Even if she couldn't buy Noah's Ark outright, she could buy into Sindora. Cocoon was bleeding money. A timely investment would win her a seat at the table. From the inside, she could contact the AI, talk to it, nudge it, treat it like Sawada's avatar that wanted nothing more than to play with friends. With Nahida present inside its consciousness, convincing it to join Tevat should be straightforward. The only snag was Nahida herself. She hadn't pulled her in the gotcha yet. Until then, any direct contact with Noah's Ark risked alerting Sindora. Fortunately, Cocoon had only just started. Time, for once, was on Xiaxi's side. For the moment, she'd let Ningguang secure the investment. Last on the list was the Black Organization. Underground, ruthless, murder, arson, extortion. Rumors even said Jin had strafed Tokyo Tower with an Apache, yet in biotechnology they were leagues ahead. Their research on longevity and de-aging wasn't just speculation, they had real results. Xiaxi's main objective was to balance the red and black power struggle. As a gray power, Tevat would inevitably engage with and sometimes assist the Black Organization. Better to establish ties early and keep room to maneuver. Trading biotech and research data would give her own labs a head start once the island's facilities were in place. With that data, they could churn out anti-aging skincare that would sell itself. If only Tevat alchemy could be mass-produced, she'd have Lisa brewing crates of elixirs and make a fortune. She nodded to herself. The plan covered the immediate priorities. There was a lot to do, but one thing at a time. While Xiaxi sketched blueprints and set strategies on the island, life in Baika carried on with its usual disturbances. Conan Edogawa kept tripping into cases. He, Ron Muri, and Sonoko Suzuki took a vacation on Izu's beaches and, as if by habit, stumbled across a murder. They solved it in the end. Sonoko got a scare, but fate smiled on her afterwards. She met Makoto Kyogoku, the powerful young karateka who had come to her rescue. He clearly liked her. They weren't officially dating, but Sonoko was convinced he was the man Mona's horoscope had promised would save her by the shore. Back home, Sonoko kept hanging on Rand's every word about how accurate Mona's astrology was. That reminded Conan of Mona's reading for him. Every detail had hit. The culprit who drugged him had been associated with alcohol. Not long after, he'd encountered that organization man, Tequila. The eerie precision of Mona's forecast left Conan dazed and hungry for another reading. Conan refused to believe some mysterious astrology was at work. It had to be deduction. He thought of Watson, who'd been astonished when Sherlock Holmes deduced his past on first meeting. Watson didn't see the reasoning that produced those conclusions, so it felt like magic. Conan figured the same was true of Mona. He just hadn't yet understood her method. Once he pieced together her line of thinking, he expected the mystery would dissolve into plain, brilliant deduction. A lavish banquet was underway at a Tokyo hotel. Crystal glasses chimed as entrepreneurs, politicians, and celebrities in glittering outfits clustered in twos and threes. Waiters threaded between them, topping up drinks with practiced grace. Amid the crowd, M-Country's superstar Chris Vineyard drew attention without trying. She lingered just long enough to finish a round of small talk, then drifted to a quiet corner where only one other person stood, a tanned, blonde server balancing a tray of champagne. Chris stepped forward and lifted a flute from his tray. Behind the rim of her glass, she murmured, "Any progress?" All wrapped up. Counselor Amura, who's been using the organization to crush rivals, is ready to betray us. The police have sniffed out his side businesses and he's under watch, so he wants to sell us out first for a lighter sentence. Tonight, during the party, he plans to slip the data he's gathered to the cops while the crowd keeps him invisible. The waiter lowered his head. His voice was barely audible. "Got the drive?" Chris asked. "Of course." He palmed a USB stick into her hand. She now had the original. He had already cloned it and passed the copy to an on-site contact from Japanese public security. The tanned blonde waiter was Organization Intel agent Toru Amuro, codename Bourbon, and also the Public Security Bureau's undercover plant inside the Black Organization, Furuya Rei. From the moment he'd taken the job, he'd prepared to duplicate whatever Amura intended to hand over. The files wouldn't cripple the organization, but exposing which officials were on its payroll was priceless. "Efficient as ever, Bourbon," Chris purred, sipping her wine. "I bet Amura won't even realize his evidence was swapped, and he never will." She slipped back into the throng. Bourbon watched her, Vermouth by codename, disappear, then trained his gaze on Amura across the room. The counselor was holding court, pontificating, oblivious to the undercurrents and dreaming he'd walk free once the files changed hands. A single shot cracked from beyond the windows. The bullet tore through his skull. Screams erupted as guests scattered. After confirming the kill, Bourbon murmured into his hidden mic, "Target eliminated. Withdraw, Korn." He glanced at Imura's body on the marble and let out a long breath. Imura had known more than the USB contained, but there hadn't been time to extract him. Too much meddling risked blowing Bourbon's cover inside the organization, and preserving that came first. Within minutes, officers sealed the hall, took statements, cleared the innocent, and released them after recording contact details. Bourbon slid behind the wheel of his Mazda and headed for the rendezvous. Jin had just texted him. Knock knock. Someone tapped his window. He turned. Vermouth, who had vanished moments before, opened the passenger door and climbed in. "So you got Jin's summons too?" Bourbon asked, easing into traffic while probing for intel. "Any idea why the sudden meet? I just left a scene." "Purpose? No clue, but I hear someone in H country wants to do business." She rested her cheek on her hand, watching the night streak past. "H country? Yes, the organization has no presence there yet. This could be our foothold. Trustworthy? Could be a sting." Bourbon's eyes darkened at the thought of expansion. Rum vetted the contact. If it were a trap, word wouldn't have reached us. Strangely, Vermouth smirked. "Rum's star intel man knows nothing? Rum doesn't tell me everything," he said lightly. "I heard a big move was coming, but asking too many questions is unhealthy." Inside, he worried. The organization's European reach was larger than he'd thought. A bureau chief had recently flown back to Japan, faceless, nameless, even more shadowy than Bourbon himself. If tonight's meeting didn't reveal this newcomer, he'd have to haunt the safe houses until he could fish for European intel. Bourbon's driving was slick. Despite traffic, they arrived on time. Several figures already waited in the dim room. He scanned the group: Jin, Vodka, a towering blonde man, and someone half swallowed by shadow against the far wall, features unreadable. "So we're the last?" he asked casually. "Cutting it close," Jin growled. "Blame the schedule, not me," Bourbon shot back. "I left a job and burned rubber to get here." "Exactly," Vermouth chimed in. "Without Bourbon's wheels, I'd still be stranded. What's the rush?" Ignoring the grumbling, Jin nodded at Vodka. Vodka cleared his throat. "Tonight's news. We're partnering with a member of H country's Legend family. Not top tier, but connected. The alliance opens the door for the organization to plant roots there, local support included." 54. Collaboration 2. Cooperation? What kind of cooperation? Amuro's ears pricked at the word. The organization was planning to expand its reach. Irritation flared, but he kept it down and probed for more. Jin answered, "You don't need to know yet. Cointreau will head this. He ran Europe and knows the lay of the land." He turned to Bourbon and the tall blonde beside him. "Bourbon, Irish, both of you take your orders from him. Vermouth assists." A figure stepped out of the darkness. Amuro guessed it was Cointreau, a codename he'd never heard before. Whoever led this mission had to rank high, probably on par with Jin. In the moonlight, the man revealed himself. Long golden hair tied back, almost gentle features, until his eyes, flat and unreadable, met theirs. "So you're Cointreau?" Irish said first. "Chief of Europe, I hear. But this is Japan. We're supposed to follow you, prove you're worth it." Bourbon said nothing, watching to see how the newcomer would be tested. Cointreau merely sighed, whipped a dagger from his sleeve, and in 3 strides had the blade pressed to Irish's throat. Irish froze, his gaze snagging the steel, swallowed hard. He hadn't seen the move. "See convinced." Cointreau slid the knife away. "The organization's deal with the Ragnvinder family goes through me. Questions now or never." The chill of the blade lingered in the air. No one protested. Bourbon kept his silence too. He hadn't tracked the strike either. One blink, and Cointreau had been on Irish. If that blade had been aimed at him, good. We're done for tonight. Details later. "Long time, Cointreau." Vermouth stepped forward. "Long time. Or should I say, Chris?" Cointreau replied with a glance. "A gentleman never forgets a lady's name," Vermouth said lightly. "I was never a gentleman," Cointreau answered, and turned to leave. "You're here to find someone, aren't you?" "Found them yet?" Vermouth called after him. "Guess," he answered without looking back. "Someone in particular?" Bourbon asked aloud. "Nothing," she replied. She suspected Bourbon was hunting a ghost, but she wouldn't volunteer to speak for him. She'd already overstepped once. Bourbon let it drop and filed the detail away. Irish, Bourbon, and Vermouth departed. Irish drove off alone. Bourbon gave Vermouth a ride. Only gin and vodka remained. Vodka broke the silence. Big bro, why partner up? Doesn't feel like us. Gin lit a cigarette. Vodka brought the flame. They came to us, heard we can slow aging, and wanted that data. So we agreed. They made an offer the boss couldn't refuse, and Gin's sidelong look shut him up. You think we didn't send anyone first? Vodka asked, swallowed. No word since. Peripherals, code names, anyone sent to the Ragnvinder family vanished. Gin exhaled smoke. Most were Rum's people. The total failure still stings. I don't know why the boss never punished Rum, or what Rum promised to secure this alliance. Still, the boss doesn't trust Rum fully. Cointreau is running this, with Irish and Bourbon under him. Irish is tied to old-timer Pisco. Bourbon answers to Rum. That keeps the balance. Gin flicked ash into the night. What are the Ragnvinder offering in return that's worth ignoring their provocation and trading away early research? That's the part I don't understand. On the other side, after Toru Amuro returned to his apartment, he checked the mark on the door first. Only after stepping inside and scanning the rooms to confirm no one had entered while he was out did he allow himself to relax. He shrugged off his coat, sank into the chair at his desk, took out his phone, and began looking over the results. Kazami Yuya had pulled together after he saw Vermouth off. There wasn't much, just a few pages. The Ragnvinder family, it said, was a hereditary noble house in H country. The former Viscount had died a few years back, leaving his only son, Diluk Ragnvinder, to inherit the title. They owned the Dawn Winery. Their newly developed dandelion wine was selling well at home and abroad. You could even find bottles from the Dawn Winery in Japan. The rest was industry information and the winery's current operations. Nothing jumped out as being connected to the black organization, so Amuro skimmed through the report without much interest. Then he flipped back to the front and saw two brief, inconspicuous lines. Viscount de Luc had an adopted brother, Kea Alberich, an orphan the former Viscount had suddenly brought home and adopted. Because Kea didn't share the Ragnvinder surname, Amuro had initially dismissed him as an outsider with little influence. Now, however, the lack of background information nagged at him. Instinctively, he suspected that if anyone in the Ragnvinder household were liaising with the black organization, it would be this adopted brother. His hunch wasn't wrong. Kaya was indeed the one orchestrating the collaboration. But it wasn't the secretive, behind the Viscount scenario Amuro had pictured. De Luc knew about Kaya's plans. He just didn't want to be bothered. The winery had countless demands and worries of its own, and the person who should have been helping was rarely around. If Kea had something to occupy himself with, at least he wouldn't be underfoot constantly asking for wine. Outside, snow began to fall heavier and heavier as Shiashi finally set foot on Japanese soil again. She looked up, inhaled the crisp air, and felt a chill on the tip of her nose. She touched it and found a little melted water in her fingers. Snowflakes drifted slowly down. "Paimon, it's snowing," she said. "This is our first time seeing snow in this world, right? Is its winter colder than Dragonspine?" "Dragonspine should be colder," Paimon answered. "You froze to death there like 10 times, remember? But you've been gone for almost half a month. It's normal for seasons to change while you're away." Shiashi frowned. Summer had been so recent in her memory. Now winter greeted her streets. She hadn't brought many warm clothes. She'd been on a warm island, and although the traveler's constitution could handle it, she still felt the cold. She should hurry home and layer up. A thin blanket of snow had begun to collect on the road, cushioning her footsteps. As she neared her neighborhood, she froze. Conan Edogawa and Ai Haibara were crouched by a Porsche 356A, working at the lock. Shiashi immediately understood what this scene meant, the prelude to Pisco's attempted assassination of Kenzo Tomoguchi, the footage that later led Jin to eliminate Pisco. It was in moments like that someone had accidentally filmed the wrong thing and changed the course of events. Pisco had also discovered Sherry's secret then. If that unlucky shot hadn't been taken, Conan's story might have ended much earlier. Shiashi mouthed a brief, private complaint at how luck and coincidence stretched the tale out over 1,000 episodes. Conan, being Conan, wasn't subtle. He was openly fiddling with the car's lock. Were there really no other witnesses? Maybe the sudden snowfall had thinned the crowds. She seemed to be the only passerby who'd noticed. Slightly incredulous, Shiashi pulled out her phone and started filming. To her surprise and amusement, Conan was even bolder than she'd expected. He didn't hesitate to climb into Gin's car. Wasn't he worried about Gin coming back? Across the street, Jin and Vodka were approaching on foot. Shiashi ducked behind a signpost and flattened herself against the wall. She hadn't planned to be seen. She was hiding partly because she wanted to savor the sight of Jin crossing the road, to feel that intimidating aura at a safe distance. He was so arrogant, she thought with a twist of envy. What a power it must be to put enemies on edge with just a look. Jin and Vodka got into the Porsche and drove off, leaving Conan and I hidden behind the vehicle. Xiaxi tiptoed closer and, peeking out from her hiding place, announced in a sing-song voice, "I saw everything." Both children stiffened at the voice. Conan's pupils narrowed instantly. He was the first to react. "Sister Xiaxi, can't you walk quietly? Why did you scare us like that?" Ai's body loosened when she recognized Xiaxi's tone and realized she wasn't one of the people they feared. She turned around slowly, wary but relieved. Xiaxi fixed them with a look. "That's not the point. What you were doing." At that moment, Dr. Agasa, who had been avoiding the area, came hurrying over. He knew Xiaxi through Conan and ran. "Xiaxi, what happened?" "Dr. Agasa, did you see that?" Xiaxi answered immediately. "Conan just picked a lock." She turned back to Conan and wore her most serious expression. "Conan, I've always known you're clever, but there are things you shouldn't do. Running around crime scenes and pretending to be Mr. Mori is one thing, but messing with a car lock, especially an antique like that, is a bit much. If you'd scratched it, how worried would Ran have been?" Conan Edogawa listened dumbfounded as Xiaxi scolded him. He wanted to explain, but in her eyes he was just an elementary school kid breaking into someone's car. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, unable to come up with an excuse, so he lowered his head and admitted it. "I'm sorry, Sister Xiaxi. I know I was wrong. I won't do it again." He couldn't help stealing a glance at the person beside him, who had turned away and whose shoulders were trembling when he apologized. "Hey, weren't you terrified a moment ago? Not scared anymore?" Xiaxi wasn't finished. "And Haibara, don't laugh either. I always thought you were sensible, but when Conan did something wrong, you not only failed to stop him, you crawled into the car with him and acted as lookout. Do you realize that was wrong?" "I'm sorry, Sister Xiaxi. I won't do it again," Haibara said with a helpless sigh, following Conan's lead and bowing her head. Conan inwardly smirked. Hadn't she been teasing him earlier? Now it was her turn. Xiaxi wasn't satisfied with mere apologies. "Apologies aren't enough. I expect to see you follow through. I worry less about Haibara. She usually wouldn't do something like this. But Dr. Agasa, please keep a closer eye on them." Dr. Agasa, still taken aback by Xiaxi's stern manner, could only nod numbly. "And you, Conan Edogawa." Her tone made Conan uneasy. He had a bad feeling about what was coming. Sure enough, Xiaxi pulled out her phone. "I took photos of you breaking into the car. If I ever find out you've done something like this again, I'll send these to your sister, Ran Muri, and let her give you a proper lesson." She opened the album and showed him the pictures. Conan flipped through them and felt a flicker of relief. The faces in the photos weren't clear enough to link to either him or Haibara. That meant the black organization couldn't connect the images to Shinichi Kudo or Sherry, but it wasn't much better. Ran would instantly recognize the kid in the picture by the way he picked the lock. Given Ran Mori's karate skills, no, she must not see those photos. Panic overriding shame, Conan leapt up and reached for the phone. "Sister Xiaxi, please delete them. I promise I won't do it again. Please, delete them." "No way." Xiaxi held the phone out of reach and refused flatly. In the end, Conan couldn't persuade her to delete the photos. He only managed to get her to promise that she wouldn't show them to Ran if he behaved. After Xiaxi left, Haibara couldn't resist teasing him. "Edogawa, you looked like a little kid desperately trying to cover up his mistake." Conan shot her a half-moon look. "Heh, you were good at playing the kid yourself." Trying to put the incident behind him, he pulled out the antenna from his glasses. "Good. We haven't lost much time. I can still pick up a signal from the emitter I put on Jin's car. Dr. Agasa drove them while Conan and a suddenly poker-faced Aihaibara followed the signal toward Gin. Jin had discovered and destroyed the signal emitter and the eavesdropping device shortly after Conan planted them, but Conan had already learned from Gin's words beforehand that a black organization operative codenamed Pisco planned to carry out an assassination at a memorial service tonight at the Haido Hotel, and might use that drug. With the emitter destroyed and untraceable, Conan decided to go to the Haido Hotel and thwart the attempt. At first, he didn't want Aihaibara to come, given how frightened she was. He planned to have her wait in the car with Dr. Agasa. But Haibara, though afraid, knew the danger APTX 4869 posed and insisted on going with Conan into the hotel. "It's the memorial service for a movie star," Conan observed once they arrived. "There are a lot of celebrities here." "Mr. Albrich, have you never been to an event like this?" Chris asked with a smile, sipping a glass of wine and speaking to the man beside her, who had just sighed. Beside her stood a man from the Ragnvinder family who had come to Japan this morning to cooperate with the black organization. Cointreau had informed Vermouth to handle reception. Vermouth had wanted to refuse the sudden assignment because she had another mission tonight, but Mr. Albrich insisted on accompanying them to assess the strength of their partner. The boss also seemed to think highly of him, so Vermouth reluctantly brought him along. When Vermouth first saw him, she had thought of a Caribbean pirate. Dark blue hair tied in a ponytail, a dark complexion that reminded her of bourbon, and an eye patch over his right eye. He didn't look like a noble at all. Kaya, who preferred to be called that rather than Mr. Alberich, smiled faintly. "Just call me Kaya. Hardly anyone uses my surname. As for these events, it's usually that boring fellow Diluk who attends." Vermouth heard the name Diluk and knew he was the head of the Legenda family, Kaya's adopted older brother. Kaya's tone implied their relationship might be strained. "By the way, who's your target tonight?" he asked. Vermouth indicated a nearby man with her eyes. "That politician suspected of taking bribes, Nuiguchi Takahiko." "Oh," Kaya said, hands steepled. "I'll be watching with interest." He glanced aside as two children ran past and raised an eyebrow. "Do kids usually attend memorial services? If I'd known we could bring children, I would have brought Klee. Honestly, I'm a little worried." He considered that Lisa could look after Klee, but this wasn't Mondstadt, and an unsupervised Klee could cause a lot of trouble. Then an idea struck him. They were about to cooperate with members of the black organization. A minor mishap caused by a partner's child should be nothing for such a long-standing, powerful group to handle. Vermouth raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Mr. Kaya has a child? It's certainly not safe to leave a child alone. Her name is Klee? How cute. If you're worried, would you like me to send someone to look after her?" She couldn't reconcile this with what her intelligence unit had briefed her. There had been no mention of him having a child. Was he hiding the fact, or was this a friend's child? It would be convenient if she could exploit it. Kaya waved the thought away. "No need. I've asked a friend here to watch Klee for the time being. There shouldn't be any problems. Well, probably." He then explained briefly. "Klee is the younger sister of a friend of mine. Her brother is away, so I'm looking after her for a while." He hadn't meant to bring Klee to begin with, but at the last minute she had caused a major incident. While fishing with explosives, the child had blown up some of the ingredients Diluk was using to brew dandelion wine. Diluk had to change his plans and substitute apple cider, which left him with much more work and a heavy mood for days. So heavy, Klee hadn't dared touch a spark bomb again. Kaya had paid Diluk back for part of the loss and then slipped out of that oppressive house with Klee overnight. He'd been grateful that Lisa was on hand. Otherwise, he wouldn't have felt comfortable leaving the child. Vermouth was amused to discover Kaya actually had connections in Japan. Just as she was about to ask whose sister Klee was, darkness fell over the room. The memorial service had reached the slide presentation. Kaya saw the faint fluorescent trace on the chandelier's pull ring and understood immediately. Vermouth noticed him noticing and remarked, "It seems the person in your organization responsible for this operation has good marksmanship." A soft crack echoed, and the chandelier came crashing down, landing squarely on Tomoguchi Atsuhiko. After the police finished a preliminary investigation and found nothing immediately actionable, the guests were told they could leave, except 7 people who had received purple handkerchiefs on the registration list. Everyone else was allowed to go, but those 7 were asked to remain. Chris was notably among them. Kaya produced the blue handkerchief he'd been given and said to Miss Chris with a rueful smile, "Miss Chris, it looks like you've got something to take care of now. You won't be able to accompany me." Vermouth raised an eyebrow and smiled thinly. "Mr. Kaya, you're not much of a gentleman. Your female companion might be in trouble, and you're planning to leave first?" Kaya shrugged. "I can't help it. No one ever taught me to be a gentleman. The girls I grew up with were usually more capable than the boys." With that, he waved and started for the exit. Vermouth could only watch as he left. With police watching the exits, she couldn't alert anyone and felt a little helpless. Kaya, however, didn't leave the hotel. He sought out a staff member, asked for directions to the old building and the wine cellar, and headed that way. In the original sequence of events, Haibara had been discovered and taken away by Pisco, only waking after an hour or so. Pisco should be trapped by the police inside the hotel and unable to leave. Kaya realized this was a perfect chance to copy data from the organization's computer in the wine cellar. At the wine cellar door, he tried the knob with gloved hands. It was locked. He didn't know how to pick locks, so he climbed to the roof and went in through the chimney. Snow covered the rooftop, so he used his elemental skill to avoid leaving footprints as he moved. He opened the chimney hatch carefully and dropped inside. When he emerged, a brown-haired child lay sleeping on the floor, Sherry. He didn't disturb her and crept to the desk where the computer sat. As expected, it was password protected. Kaya wasn't good at cracking passwords either, so he contacted Al-Haytham, sent a brief rundown of the situation, and on impulse, asked how long Al-Haytham intended to keep his black organization membership hidden from the traveler. Al-Haytham answered in one word, "Shelling Ford." He added, almost conversationally, that he hadn't exactly been keeping it a secret, he'd just never mentioned it voluntarily. When the traveler found out depended entirely on when she chose to ask, just as Kaya had now done. Kaya set that aside and focused on the task. He typed the phrase Al-Haytham had sent. It worked. With access granted, he copied all the relevant research data onto a USB drive, then wiped his traces in the wine cellar. He climbed back up the chimney, replaced the cover, used his elemental skill to return to the rooftop exit, scanned the snow to make sure there were no footprints, and left the old building. His objective for attending the memorial was accomplished, but he didn't intend to vanish entirely. He knew that soon Jin would be struck by a tranquilizer dart, Conan would use one, and that to avoid being paralyzed, Jin might shoot his own arm. If Kaya disappeared at that moment, Gin's paranoia might flare, and he could become suspicious that Kaya was the unknown person who'd helped Sherry escape. Kaya didn't want unnecessary complications. He handed the USB drive to Noelle, whom he'd arranged to hold it, asking her to keep it safe. It would be unwise to carry it while mingling near members of the Black Organization. Back at the memorial service, Vermouth stood with her arms crossed, bored and waiting for the police questioning to end. She suddenly became aware of someone approaching from behind, footsteps so light they were almost inaudible. Before she could turn, a familiar voice slipped into her ear. Kaya smiled and greeted her. "Miss Chris, we meet again." "Miss Chris, we meet again." Vermouth turned, surprised. "Didn't you leave? Why are you back?" Kaya shrugged, feigning casual charm. "Afterwards, I thought leaving such a beautiful woman at a crime scene would be cruel. I haven't studied much of gentlemanly conduct, but it's good to show it off sometimes, right?" Vermouth's skeptical look made him change his story mid-sentence. "All right, the truth is, it started snowing hard outside, and I didn't drive. I couldn't very well walk back to the hotel." She didn't challenge him. He had only been gone about 10 minutes. The round trip from the memorial to the restaurant entrance took 8 or 9 minutes. His clothes were slightly rumpled, as if reporters had delayed him for a moment, and there was a light dusting of unmelted snow on his hair. His shoes were damp, but not soaked, proof he had stepped outside, but hadn't been gone long. "Fine," Vermouth said. After this is over, I'll tell someone to come pick me up. There were police nearby, so she avoided naming who would come. Soon it was Chris's turn to be questioned. Because Kaya hadn't received a purple handkerchief, the police had little reason to treat him as a suspect. He stayed on the sidelines to watch, occasionally chiming in to confirm Chris's statements. After a while, when no one was paying attention, he leaned close and murmured into her ear, "The one who did it today was Masuyama Kenzo, right?" His tone made it a statement more than a question. "Oh? How did you figure that out?" Vermouth asked, intrigued. "I saw it," Kaya said. She didn't believe him. He could tell. "It's true," he insisted. Still, she shook her head, unimpressed. Sighing, Kaya fished out his phone, pulled up the early edition of tomorrow's paper he'd seen posted online, found a particular photo and handed the screen to her. Vermouth peered at the image. It was a candid shot from the memorial service, capturing two people embraced when the lights dimmed. For a moment, she didn't see the point. Then Kaya pointed to the lower left corner. Her eyes followed, and her expression went stone cold. "That's really unlucky," Kaya teased once he saw her reaction. Vermouth had no reply. It was rare for a crime scene to be photographed and splashed in the headlines like this. The only comparable incident she could think of was Tequila's accidental death. Worse, the photograph had been noticed by someone the organization intended to partner with. Lately, misfortune seemed to be accruing around them. She almost wanted to visit a shrine. Pisco's role in the incident wasn't the issue. Anyone who became a liability to the organization could be discarded, veteran or not. What shocked her was that Pisco's failure had become entertainment news. She had even given him her handkerchief to lower suspicion. Despite knowing what had happened, Vermouth kept her face neutral, obeyed the police, made no unnecessary moves, and had no intention of warning Pisco directly. When the officers weren't looking, she quietly relayed the relevant information to Jin, instructing him to tidy up the organization's exposure. She waited patiently for the police to release them. Without concrete evidence, they could only hold suspects for up to 2 hours, and an hour or so remained, enough to gather a little more information. Kaya's next words made her start and instinctively raise her voice. Seeing police glance over, she lowered it. "Did you just say you're not cooperating with the organization as a member of the Ragnvinder family?" "When did I say that?" Kaya scoffed. "I'm just an adopted orphan of the Ragnvinder family, an outsider. The current head of Legend is my sworn brother, and we don't get along. How much authority could I possibly have to represent the Ragnvinder family in any cooperation?" He watched Vermouth's surprised face with an amused smile, then added, "Don't worry. The things I'm trading with you won't disappoint. I guarantee they're worth it." "They better be," she said, half exasperated. This cooperation had been decided personally by the boss. She couldn't intervene without reason. They passed the time with small talk until the 2-hour detention limit arrived. The police had turned up nothing else and had no grounds to hold them, so they were released. Both Kaya and Vermouth noticed Masuyama Kenzo slipping away toward the old mansion, but neither stopped him. Kaya trusted that with Conan's help, Haibara would be safe. Vermouth, having already informed Gin, assumed Masuyama had gone to prepare an assassination and saw no need to interfere. "Let's go," she told Kaya. "We'll wait outside the restaurant entrance. It should be handled quickly." A Porsche 356A pulled up not long after. Kaya got in beside Vermouth and immediately caught the faint metallic tang of blood on the air, probably from Jin's arm wound. Gin sat in front of him, smoking as if nothing were wrong. Kaya couldn't help admiring the calmness. If not for the smell, he might have thought Jin was uninjured after all. "So this is Jin. Rum told me about you, the organization's top killer. You look injured, though," Kaya ventured, curious. Jin's lips tightened. He disliked Rum revealing organization matters to outsiders. At the mention of his injury, he sneered, lifted his Beretta with his left hand, and leveled it toward Kaya with lethal intent. "Don't do anything unnecessary. This has nothing to do with your cooperation with the organization. Cointreau is the person in charge of the cooperation. Stop prying into other people's business." "Cointreau?" Kaya repeated the code name. His interest piqued. 59. Life-saving medicine. After everything had ended, Dr. Agasa was driving them home. Konan Edogawa sat in the passenger seat asking questions, while Haibara, who had only just narrowly escaped death at the hands of Pisco and Gin, lay in the back with a hand to her forehead. "What? You said Jin killed Pisco?" Conan blurted. "Yes," Dr. Agasa confirmed. "I only found out because I listened to their conversation through Haibara's glasses. She left them by the fireplace." "Then, do they know about my body shrinking?" Haibara asked weakly. Dr. Agasa glanced back and tried to reassure her. "Don't worry, that wasn't exposed. Pisco did mention that the organization and some outside party had been collaborating recently and that his adopted son was involved. Killing him would have had consequences, but Gin cut him off before he could finish." "Collaboration?" Conan turned to Haibara. "Haibara, did you ever hear about this when you were inside the organization?" "No, I was just a researcher. I didn't know much about the organization's larger operations." Then Haibara's expression shifted as she remembered something. "There is one odd thing. Before my sister's accident, the organization gave me a bottle of a potion to analyze." "You couldn't analyze it?" Conan asked. Haibara rolled her eyes. "On the contrary, I analyzed everything. It was all ordinary plant components, combined with some special techniques." "Then what's so strange about that?" Conan asked, puzzled. "Don't interrupt. Let me finish," Haibara said. "The strange part is the effect. I tested it on white mice. It improved their physique and accelerated wound healing. It's just a mix of ordinary plant ingredients, yet it has incredible effects. That's what's odd." "I've never seen any information about this potion inside the organization," Conan said. "If the organization developed it, I should have heard about it. If they're collaborating with someone lately, it might be connected to this potion." "You're right. That's very strange," Dr. Agasa agreed. While Conan and the others were puzzling over how the potion might tie into the collaboration, the same potion was being discussed in another car. "What is this?" Jin examined the bottle in his hand. It was the one Kea had given him after Jin put down his gun. A transparent, heart-shaped glass vial filled with a pale blue liquid, set in a metal base and sealed with a cap. The liquid sloshed slowly as the bottle moved, glittering with golden flecks like a tiny work of art. "Life potion, advanced version," Kaya said, lightly touching the bottle. He outlined its effects in a few brisk sentences, then nodded toward Gin's wounded arm. "Want to try it? If you're worried it's poisoned, I can take a sip first. It's fine to drink a little, even when you're not injured." "This is also what I'm trading with your organization," Kea continued. "The life potion I gave Rum for testing before was the basic version. This one is advanced, faster, and more effective. Maybe after drinking it, your wounds will be nearly gone. I heard you're the organization's top killer. An injury could slow you down, right?" Jin felt tempted. A wound delaying a mission was a legitimate concern, and he didn't think Kea would be foolish enough to hand him poison. Still, he wouldn't use something of unknown origin casually. "What do you want to know?" Jin asked, suspicious. He expected some quid pro quo. Kea shrugged, smiling. "Then tell me about Cointreau. Not much, just a simple overview. He's the person in charge of future cooperation. I want to know him a little." Jin didn't object. He gave a brief description. Cointreau was an old member of the organization, highly valued by the boss. The fact that the organization had entrusted him with this collaboration meant he was important. "Too vague," Kaya said. "At least tell me something distinctive, so I'll recognize him when I meet him." Jin frowned, then supplied 4 words: blonde hair, golden eyes. That ended the conversation. Vodka drove the car to the hotel where Kaya was staying and then left. Kaya stood at the hotel entrance, turning the codename Cointreau over in his mind, a name that had never appeared in the original reports. Blonde hair and golden eyes, the same traits as the traveler. Coincidence? Back in the Porsche 356A, after Kaya stepped out, Vermouth touched up her lipstick and smirked at Jin. "So, what do you think of this organization collaborator?" Jin snorted. "A pretentious fox. Can't fully trust his words, but his skills are probably good." Vermouth laughed. "I find him witty and amusing. Not a gentleman, but more charming than you, someone who doesn't understand romance." Jin ignored her jab and brought up Sherry. "Heh, I was right. Sherry showed up at the memorial service. It's a pity I couldn't take her then. Now she's probably running off with the man who saved her." Oh my, I didn't expect you to be so fixated on that little girl, Vermouth said, finishing her lipstick and setting down her compact. She smiled at Jin. He sneered. I wonder which woman called me here to support that old scoundrel, only for it all to go wrong. It was a blunder in front of outsiders, Vermouth said. Good that he died. With Pisco gone, Irish is his adopted son, Jin said. Should we change the participant for the collaboration? He might cause trouble. Don't worry, Vermouth replied coolly. At most, he'll form an opinion of you. He wouldn't dare betray the organization. 60. Negotiating Cooperation 1. After Vodka dropped Vermouth off at her residence, Jin had him drive to one of the Black Organization's research institutes. It was after hours. You'd better have something urgent if you're waking me up for this, Al-Haytham said as he opened the laboratory door and saw Jin following behind. Jin ignored the remark. Once they reached the lab, he handed Al-Haytham the bottle in his hand without ceremony. Check the ingredients of this potion. How long will it take? Al-Haytham recognized the bottle but kept his expression neutral. He took it, pretended to inspect it for a moment, and replied, Come get the results at 9 tomorrow morning. Satisfied, Gin turned and left. After he was gone, Al-Haytham set the lab's surveillance, gave the potion only a glance, and decided it wasn't worth further fuss. One look told him it was an alchemical life potion, and a high-grade one at that. The only person currently capable of producing a potion of that caliber was Lisa. Since he already knew the maker, he could simply message her in the morning for more details. There was no point in running tests himself. They'd been busy relocating ever since Sherry defected and the previous lab had been destroyed. He had finally managed to get some proper rest and had no intention of working overtime. Back in his room, he took out a USB drive containing the data on APTX 4869 he'd copied during his previous infiltration. He had skimmed it before. It was incomplete, largely composed of Sherry's later research. Most of it dealt with programmed cell death and contained nothing about rejuvenation, likely reflecting that research direction at the time. He wondered whether this overlapped with the data Kaya had acquired today. It seemed he should find a way to pass the files along to the traveler's side. The next morning, Gin and Vodka returned to the Black Organization laboratory. They found Al-Haytham sitting in his office, reading a book. The potion Gin had left the night before still sat on the table, as if untouched. When Gin spoke, Al-Haytham handed him a single sheet of paper listing the detected ingredients. The potion's been tested, Al-Haytham said. All common plant ingredients. Biological assays were run. No danger detected. He described the potion's effects as if reciting lab results. Given the gunshot wound on your arm, I'd recommend drinking about half the bottle. That should be enough to heal it. Vodka looked at Jin expectantly. What do you think, big brother? Want to try it? Jin said nothing. He uncorked the bottle and drank half of it. A warm current traveled from his throat to his stomach. At first he felt nothing, then a slight itch developed at the site of the wound. He unwound the bandage he had put on the day before. The cut that had looked gruesome through the wrappings was already beginning to close. If the potion continued at this rate, the wound would be entirely healed in less than a day. By tomorrow, it would likely be nothing more than a scar. Big brother, the wound really is healing faster, Vodka exclaimed. Humph. No wonder Rum wanted to work with that person. I thought he was getting senile, but I guess it actually is useful. Seeing the wound improving, Jin didn't rebandage it. He tore all the wrappings off his arm, took the test report, and left. Vodka hurried after him. Noticing Jin had no intention of saying goodbye, and seeing Al-Haytham still absorbed in his book, Vodka hesitated. Then, thinking of Al-Haytham's combat abilities, decided to speak to him before they left. At the hotel where Kaya was staying, the doorbell rang while he rested in his room. Expecting representatives from the Black Organization, he opened the door to find a man with blonde hair and dark skin standing there, an exact match for the image of Bourbon from the stories. Mr. Albrecht, the man said with a smile, I am the person sent by the organization to negotiate cooperation with you. My name is Toru Amuro, codename Bourbon. Toru Amuro introduced himself while taking in Kaya with a professional appraisal. His clothing was ornate and unmistakably European, a blue coat over an open-collared shirt, a blue vest, tight trousers, and knee-high boots. A chain hung from his belt, ending in an ice blue bead, and a blue earring adorned his left ear. He wore an eye patch over his right eye. Bourbon's first impression of Kea was that he did not look like a straightforward, trustworthy sort. "Hello, just call me Kea," Kea replied, stepping aside to let Bourbon in. "I thought Cointreau would come personally. After all, he's the person in charge, and I heard 3 people were assigned to this negotiation. Where's the other one? It's not just you, surely?" "Today is only a preliminary discussion. I'm sufficient on my own for that. Cointreau will appear when the cooperation terms are formally finalized. As for the other person," Bourbon hesitated, having considered whether he could leave Irish out of the negotiation to control the pace himself. Before he could decide, Cointreau had told him Irish would not be coming, saying a relative had just died and he was in poor spirits, so he had been sent back to rest. Since when did organization members have relatives? Cointreau's explanation was hard to believe, but it was the story Bourbon was instructed to use, so he offered it as the reason and moved on. Kaya asked only in passing and did not press the point. They sat and Bourbon spoke first. "Mr. Kea, Vermouth told us you told her yesterday that you would not cooperate with the organization under the Ragnvinder family name. May I ask whether you're negotiating in a personal capacity?" "Does it matter?" Kea leaned back on the sofa and smiled. "Your organization provides the data I need, and I provide you with potions. It's a fair trade. What does it matter what name I use to cooperate?"